On Saturday, November 2nd, 2024, the Louisiana Center for the Book in the State Library of Louisiana held the 20th Annual Louisiana Book Festival. Andre Dubus III was only one of the more than 230 authors, poets, and scholars to present at the event. Andre Dubus III is the author of Such Kindness and 8 other books, including the bestsellers TOWNIE, a memoir, and House of Sand and Fog, a National Book Award finalist in fiction and an Oprah's Book Club selection. He lives in Newburyport, Massachusetts. Here now is Andre Dubus III speaking about his new book, Ghost Dogs on Killers and Kin.
I can't get over this beautiful Art Deco Capitol building where all sorts of skullduggery has taken place. All right, so they told me I have 7 hours, so I'm going to get right to it, you guys. No, thanks for coming. Thanks for supporting this festival. I thought I would I've got a new book out called Ghost Dogs on Killers and Kin. Can you guys hear me if I'm speaking right here? And it's a collection of personal essays, and probably taken from over 30 years of my life and my writing life. And so I should just tell you a few things. Then I'm going to read a little bit, talk a little bit, but let's have a conversation if you like. I know there are writers in the chamber. I'm running for office. This is too. So I'm not one of those writers who does well creatively writing fiction based on anything that happened in my life. I always seem to do better when the fiction comes from far afield. My father was the late, wonderful short story master, Andre Dubus, and from Lafayette. And he was really good at making art from his own life experience. And to the point where I could read his short stories, and there's me, and there's my sister, and there's my poor ex-wife mother, or ex-wife of my dad. And he was a true artist at it. And over the years, I discovered early on that whenever I would sort of try to fictionalize something I'd gone through, it was always flat. It always kind of felt stale. And I think what I discovered over the years is what made it stale was I knew too much about it. And that sort of cauterized my curiosity. I taught a workshop yesterday morning, a memoir workshop, and I quoted Rumi, the 12th century Sufi poet. And I love this line. He says, "Sell your cleverness and purchase bewilderment." Isn't that beautiful? And so it's always gone better for me with novels and short stories and novellas if I'm just stepping with total bewilderment and curiosity into a situation about which I know very little. And then, of course, we're human beings. We share far more than we don't. And you don't know where you're going to recognize yourself. I've seen more of me in female characters than I have in male characters. The novel that made me an 18-year overnight success and put me on the map is a novel called House of Sand and Fog, and one of the main characters is an Iranian colonel. Well, I've never been an Iranian and I've never been a colonel, but there was a lot of me in him too. So you can go ahead and not write about yourself, but you show up anyway in all sorts of ways. But the essay, I would find that I would finish something, and for me, it takes me 3 to 5 years to write a novel. I'm slow, and then I'd find myself staring at the page, and I could feel that I just wanted to write. I wanted to capture something about my own life experience, and I wanted to capture it straight, and that's where the essay comes in. If you speak French, which a lot of people in South Louisiana do, you know the verb essayer in French means to try or to attempt. And that's where the word essay comes from. And it's an attempt to descend into your memory, to descend into your memory of maybe what you experienced, to descend into your philosophies or your theologies or lack thereof. I find for me that I don't tend to write idea essays. I don't tend to write. I've written some literary criticism, but I tend to write about what happened to me. And I find myself trying to make sense out of what was that experience anyway. I've been writing all my adult life, and it's the thing about writing I've never lost enthusiasm for, is how it can burrow into your psyche and take you places you would never see coming, and give you an awareness and a clarity that you wouldn't have had otherwise. And so, The first essay in this collection is called Fences and Fields. And I was writing about the birth of our beautiful daughter Ariadne, who's now 29 and a half years old. But when she was born, well, let me tell you how it came about. So I married this lovely Greek lady. And if you know the Greek Orthodox or Orthodox Church, baptism's a big deal. So I was raised Catholic, but man, nothing like what happens in the Orthodox Church. They strip the whole baby down. The parents sit in the front pew. The godparents are the ones who bring the baby up, and they lower the naked infant completely into the font, up to the neck. And when our son Austin was born and Chris baptized, he's pulled out and he peed all over the altar. And we rented my wife's a dancer and writer, struggling writer, and we were broke, but we grew up broke, that's fine, but we rented a hall afterwards we couldn't afford for our oldest son, for a gathering after the baptism. And then for our daughter Ariadne, said, well, we'll just have a dinner in the basement of the church, but I wanted to write a toast. I didn't want to just say thank you for coming, love you all. I wanted to say something meaningful about having our second child. We'd go on to have a third. And so every day after finishing writing, I'd start writing this toast. Ariadne, your name comes from the Greek myth. Oh, you guys, every time I read over that toast in progress, my face flushed with shame and self-loathing. It was so, can I swear in here? I won't. It was crap. It was so, and it was crap because it was false. There's a wonderful line from a novel by Nadine Gordimer where one character has an insight as to what sincerity is. And the insight is sincerity is never having an idea of oneself. Isn't that beautiful? You don't have one eye in the mirror to see how you're doing. You're just fully doing it. One of my many beefs with the digital world and social media, and don't get me started on that, is it's made everyone toxically self-conscious. Everyone's the curator of the museum of me. And no one is, I made that up, you can quote me. And everybody, and so it seems like so many of us, so millions of us, are not fully present. We're all watching ourselves be in a moment that we want to post later. And it's madness, it's madness. And I've seen it affect, I've been teaching at the college level for decades. I've seen it affect young people's ability to create. They used to be bolder. I'm speaking unfairly as a general group, but there used to be more recklessness on the page. And now I sense that these young people are afraid to make risky creative choices because they might get canceled or they might not get enough follows and likes. And so they're very tentative on the page. Anyway, that toast in progress was a horribly insincere piece of garbage because the whole time I'm writing it, I wasn't so much thinking about my beautiful infant daughter or my wife. I was seeing two people, and they were my in-laws. My wife's parents, both Greek, first-generation Americans, and I just hoped that I did not look like the loser I felt like standing there in my suit, my one suit. I had published 2 books, 3 people had read them, 2 of them were my mommy, and we were broke, my siblings and I grew up the kids of, people who were educated and valued the arts, but were poor. We were a member of the educated working poor. We moved 2 to 3 times a year for cheaper rent after my parents split up. And so, honestly, I was terrified with the birth of my second child that I was going to raise them in the poverty that we were raised in. And all of that was infecting that toast. So I finally tossed it. Chris Mason came, went downstairs for the lamb and the Retsina. Thanks for coming, Catioticsy, love you, goodbye, Sam. I didn't give a toast. Hemingway's got that great line. He said, you have to write one true sentence, just one true sentence. And so the true sentence was, what is the opening line? I'll just read it. It was a dry summer and so hot it was a mistake to go barefoot on the sidewalk. It was 100 degrees the day she was born. She was 2 weeks late. It was a full moon. And I was worried about money. I'd underbid a job again. I was building a fence for a guy in my neighborhood, and I was screwing myself financially again. And so I wrote that essay, and it has to do with what really came, I think, is my horrible knowledge that having a female child is so much different than having a male child. The primary difference for me feeling was this, that every female in this building will forever be in more danger than every male because of misogynist patriarchy. Her very anatomy endangers her. And that haunted the hell out of me, and I knew that her brother and then her future younger brother will never have that worry in this world. And so also in this book, I write about when I was 23 or 22, I actually went to Mexico looking for a contract killer with a bounty hunter for the U.S. Marshal Service, the FBI, the DEA, and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. I had a fake name, went to gay bars because the killer was bisexual, went to other places, so that's in there. He found us before we found him. And there are other things. I think what I'll do, I'll read a short one, and then, yeah, I'll just read a short one. This is called Shelter, and thank you for listening. It was the coldest winter in New England in over 100 years, and we were framing my house in the snow. For over 30 days straight, the wind chill was below zero, and most mornings my younger brother Jeb and I and our friend Jim would spend over an hour just shoveling off the job site so we could set up our cutting station, oil and load our nail guns, and light the propane heater to get the compressor warm enough to run. Most days I'd have to chisel off the decks just so we could snap a line for the toe plates of walls. I grew a beard to keep my face warm. Why not wait until spring? Because I bought these 2 acres of land over 3 years earlier, and it had taken us that long to get all the necessary permits in place. Because for the past 9 years, my wife and I had been raising our 3 children in a vinyl-sided half-house that was small and dark and cluttered with toys and secondhand furniture we owned. Because since my birth 43 years earlier, I'd lived in over 24 rented houses and apartments, had always had a landlord, some threatening my single mother with eviction, some threatening me. And now, for the first time, I had money in the bank, a lot of it, all from a novel I'd written over 4 years in my parked car, and because, well, I just couldn't wait. At first, there was the desire to get the whole project started and done with. Like most writers, for years, I've been hoping for a time when I could give my entire day to writing and reading. Now, after over 20 years of daily labor, I could finally do just that. My agent kept calling to ask why I wasn't hiring somebody to build my house. Don't you want to write another novel? I did, of course, but for the kind of house we wanted to build, an in-law apartment for my wife's aging parents, a bedroom for each of our children and one for us, it would be just too expensive to hire a builder when I had the skills to do it myself. I estimated I could cut costs in half, an accurate estimate it turned out, but part of me didn't want to do it at all. Wasn't a house just another material object anyway? Did we really need to own one? Did anybody? But this ambivalence began to dissipate after our permits were approved. It was a cold Sunday in November, the sky gray, the air heavy with future snow. 2 days earlier, my foundation contractor had poured our footings, and he told me they'd cure better if I kept them warm. So that morning, I drove to a local farm in my pickup and bought a dozen hay bales, drove to my wooded lot, tossed them off, then used a pitchfork to spray hay over concrete, my concrete, poured in the shape of my house on my land. It took us over 2 years. Every day I'd pull up to the site at 7 a.m., the smells of sawdust and pine pitch in the air, those lovely, naked 2x6 walls standing plumb, level, and square. And I'd buckle on my leather carpentry belt of tools and work alongside my brother and my friend, and later with a new carpenter I'd hired too. That spring, the snows melted, but it brought some of the heaviest rains in 50 years, and we hung massive tarps to work under. By early that summer, the 4 of us were roofing my house during a heat wave. When it came time to cover the exterior walls with cedar shingles, my wife, Fontaine, a modern dancer who used to make a living upholstering furniture, spent 2 months nailing up over half of them while I did the rest. I hired my 67-year-old mother to paint the corner boards, the soffits and fascia, the window and door casings. My wife had a fear of heights, my mother had none. There were electricians and plumbers on the job now, And every hour or so, I'd pause in my work and glance up to see my mother standing on the scaffolding 40 feet in the air, squinting in the sun as she brushed paint onto the trim of my house. I remember the doctor we rented a house from when I was 12, a tall man with thick glasses who stood at our door in his coat and tie and asked that our mother leave and take us 4 kids to live in the projects. I remembered over the years all the scrappy places we'd lived in that somebody else had owned. Painting my big new homemade house, my mother looked so happy, and it made me happy seeing that. The truth is, except for those moments of unspeakable grace holding our 3 newborn children, I had never been happier than when I was building for us this house. One late afternoon, a cold rain starting to fall, I stood on a plank outside my daughter's second-story bedroom, trying to finish the shingles around her window. The sun was down and the plank was getting slippery, and a small voice inside me said to quit now and head home. But I no longer felt that where we lived was home, and as I fit a shingle into place up against my daughter's window, this motion felt like something else, though I did not at first know what it was. Then I did. It was just like pulling the covers up to my daughter's chin right after she fell asleep. It was like doing that with her 2 brothers, too. It was like closing their bedroom door and tiptoeing down the hall. It was like locking the front and back doors and checking the windows and turning off the lights. It was like holding them as babies and wanting my arms to be a shelter for them and never wanting to let go. Thanks. So I've been married, my wife and I have been together for 36 years, and when I fell in love with her, she was 26, and now the numbers are reversed, and we're still together. And she's a dancer, and she still dances, and our kids are grown and living in California and Pittsburgh and New York, and how the hell did that happen? I remember holding my oldest son, Austin, who's 31, living in LA. He's a screenwriter. His entire little butt was on my little hand. I was holding his head and showing him the moon over the snow. The moon. Now when I go to LA, we drink beer and watch games, and anyway. So I wrote this a few years ago. I came out with a memoir called TOWNIE, and I was telling my class yesterday, it's an accidental memoir. I wasn't planning on writing it. I was wanting to write an essay about my sons in baseball and how I didn't know anything about baseball until they started to play baseball. And, you know, what I find myself preaching over and over again to my creative writing fiction students is that, you know, I quote Faulkner a lot. And Faulkner said the following. He said, he was asked late in his life, "What's the main thing a writer needs to do what you've done, sir?" He said, "Well, it ain't talent." He said, "I used to think it was talent, but I don't anymore." And he narrowed it down to one quality of mind. He said, "It's curiosity." And his exact phrase was curiosity, insight, to wonder, to mull, and to muse why it is that man does what he does. And if you have that, talent makes no difference whether you've got it or not. And I totally agree. It's always gone better for me, not when I've set out to tell a story, but when I've set out to find it. And so there's this wonderful sort of dreamlike quality that happens that every writer knows about, and I think probably people in other art forms, where you get into a trance state. D.H. Lawrence said, "It is not I who writes, but the wind that blows through me." Anyway, so 3 years and 500 pages later, I wrote what I was doing instead of playing baseball, living in first world poverty with, you know, our economically deprived single mom and my 3 siblings, and moving a lot for cheaper rent, living in tough mill towns, and having a lot of violence. And one of the many things I'm grateful about having come out with this collection of essays is in that book, it ends, just about when I leave that life and enter into my late 20s, and it ends with burying my dad, who died 25 years ago. My brother and I built his coffin, and we dug his grave with pick and shovel. And but the best part of my life's not in that book. The best part of my life is having been a dad for 31 and a half years and being a husband to my wife. So I'm going to read you. I was asked by a magazine to write a letter. Would you write a letter to a boy about love? I said, well, can I write a letter to my 2 grown sons about love? And so this is what this is. A letter to my 2 sons on love. My beautiful sons, you're young men now, 31 and 27, and you're both more perceptive than I ever was, especially when I was your age and younger, when I was full of rage. So because you are, both of you, smarter and more whole than I was at your age, you probably won't be surprised to hear that the notion of truly loving someone and being loved back terrified me. The first time I ever went to a therapist, I was 24 or 25. This was in my hometown, her office not far from the Y, where I lifted weights and hit the heavy bag and kept myself ready for the next fight. A block or 2 south was the convenience store with cracked front windows and mostly empty shelves that everybody, even the cops, knew was a front for bookies and drug dealers. Across from it was a laundromat where young mothers washed the clothes of the kids they let run wild through the streets. And to the north was the park where the drunks slept on the ground in the summer on a hill overlooking the Merrimack River. The lady who became my therapist for the next few weeks seemed old to me then, though she was only in her early 60s. She had a lined face and wore cardigan sweaters and skirts and nylons. Her eyes were gray but warm. She asked me why I'd come to her, and I wasn't sure. It wasn't because I couldn't stop looking for victimizers to victimize and once almost beat one to death and nearly got beaten to death myself. It wasn't because I saw the world as a dark place or that I expected disaster at every turn. It was because more than one girlfriend had said to me in various ways, "You don't let me love you." It was true. I would much rather do the loving, the rescuing, the tending to than have it done to me. But as I explained to that smart, kind woman in her small office so many years ago, I knew that if I surrendered to love that I would die. And then this image came to me, a clear glass of warm water and a dissolvable tablet. The water represented the sort of love required of me, the kind where you open your heart fully to the other. The tablet was me. This young man who still remembered as a boy his mother crying herself to sleep in the weeks after his father drove away. This young man who couldn't get all the fighting out of his head. His mother and father throwing things at each other, swearing, screaming, slamming doors. This young man who watched his still beautiful young mother date man after man after man and asked very few of them to stick around. This young man who, like his brother and sisters, felt tossed out on his own. We human beings are all a multitudinous mystery, so I reject the notion that it was my childhood alone that formed me into a hard tablet who wanted no part of a glass of warm water, who would rather be loved, who would rather who would rather love than be loved, who would rather hug a woman with one arm because he had to keep the other free to ward off the danger that was surely coming. I don't remember what my therapist said to me about this image, but as it hung in the air between us, I knew I did not like what it revealed about me, that I did not trust the good things in this life, that I would rather not love, as the wise saying goes, than lose and hurt again. Then I met your future mother. When I first saw her, she was doing that thing that made her her. She was dancing on stage, and I was in the audience, and I could not take my eyes off her. I was drawn not so much to her physical beauty as to the power she exuded as she moved, as if she needed no one. Like the world was hard, yes, but dance. Then, months later, meeting her for the first time, I found myself sitting next to her in the back seat of my friend's car on a 4-hour drive south to New York City. I was heading there to do a reading with your grandfather. She was heading there to visit a friend and to dance. I hadn't slept much the night before, and she was getting over the flu, and so we both laid our heads on the seats and talked quietly to one another. And the thing is, as I looked into her brown eyes, as I listened to her talk of wanting only to dance and to draw, I recognized her from long, long ago, from before I was born. On our first date together, a lunch where I was so nervous I ate only salad, I had to keep looking away from her face because tumbling down through my head was this sentence, God, that's my wife. I never wanted a wife. I never wanted marriage, and I sure as hell wasn't looking for one. But when I was in the presence of this strong, creative, and beautiful young woman, it was like hearing once again the strains of an ancient music, and I knew I was supposed to move to it, to join myself to it, whether I wanted to or not. I could have proposed to her that very day, but my fears began to stalk me like a gang of young men years earlier who cruised the streets looking for me for weeks. Then on a cold February night, 10 months after we'd met, I finally got down on one knee and asked her to marry me. She punched me in the shoulder and said, "What took you so long?" That night was 36 joyous years ago. All the way to our June wedding, I vacillated between hope and black terror. What good could ever come from marriage? What could ever come from love but pain and loss and an acute loneliness? But whenever I was with your future mother, the parts of me I was ashamed of, my lack of faith, my short fuse for bad behavior of any kind, felt smaller around her. And the parts of me that I was not ashamed of, my desire to create art, my tendency to feel compassion for others, felt larger. By opening myself to her love of me, I was opening myself to also loving the boy whom I had stopped loving to protect myself from it all. Then I was stepping into that terror the same way I learned to square off with a man who had every intention of doing me harm. On a hot, cloudless day in early summer, your mother and I vowed to love one another in her Greek Orthodox church in front of 250 people who loved us, including my mother and father, who had gone on to love other people a few times over, yet still loved one another, hugging and kissing and teasing each other whenever they could. And my sons, it is my love for this one woman all these years that has carried me into some eternal village of spirits where I have not died, but lived far more fully and acutely than I would have otherwise, and it never would have happened if I had not surrendered to the deep and terrifying and exalting mystery of love. Thank you. And how are you? So my wife, she's my first reader, and now my son Austin's my first reader because he inhales 2 to 3 books a week all year long, and he's a beautiful writer, and as is his brother Elias. But so she didn't read this book till it was out, so she keeps turning to me. These are so personal. Well, yeah, honey, they're called personal essays. They're supposed to be personal. What do you want to talk about? Let's just have a conversation. Anything you want to say, not say. I'm a teacher. I'll call on someone right now. How many of you also write? Well, let's do some writing conversation. Let's have a writing talk. You must have a thought. I'm going to call on you. What's your name? Yeah. What is it? Forrest. Oh, you're wearing a different shirt. You were in my class yesterday. He just finished his first novel, right? Yeah. Well, that's a great question. So Forrest asked, how much did you think you got from your father? So if you haven't read the work of Andre Dubus, you're in for a treat. I'm interviewing his first cousin, James Lee Burke, at 1 o'clock today on live stream. They both grew up here, same age, same generation. They both went on to be major American writers. My father is considered by many, and not just in the United States, to be one of the best short story writers America's ever produced. And I'm really proud of what he left behind. He left behind 7 collections of stories and 2 collections of essays and just 1 novel. But to answer your question, so I used to balk at that question for us because my dad left when we were kids, and so we didn't live with him, and it was a 70s divorce. I mean, we didn't sleep in his apartment not even one night. He'd come and pick us up on a Sunday, drive the 4 of us to a movie or a restaurant he could not afford, and drop us off. And a lot of divorces were like that in the 60s and 70s. And Years later, I read in a few interviews, he would say, yeah, I just used to date my children. And so he didn't get to be a dad, really. So I used to really, especially when I was younger and angry at him, and angry at my mother, and angry at my childhood, which I'm not anymore. We get older, but I used to really balk at that question, because he had no influence on me. I didn't even live with him. How about the single mother who raised us alone? How about let's talk about her? The women always get forgotten in the conversation, and then I'm full of it, Forrest. I love his work, but I don't think he's any more of an influence on me than any other writer whose work I love. But here's where he has a great influence. So I've been teaching writing for 35 years, and I've met so many writers in the classroom and beyond. And I've met so many, who are in their 70s or 80s who just started writing, and they're really good. And I met this woman, she was in her mid-80s, she was a beautiful novelist. And I said, so you've been writing all your life, huh? Have you just not sent your work out? Oh, no, honey, I just started writing 3 years ago. But you're so good at it. Well, I've been wanting to write since I was 7. Well, why haven't you? Well, because my parents didn't want me to suffer. She was from north of Boston. What? They didn't want me to be a starving artist, so I had to wait till they died. But they've been dead for 30 years, but they're like ghosts now. So finally, I wrote the book. And I've met a lot of people who are understandably, and I have students, especially students, frankly, from Asia, in Asian countries, whose parents do not want them to go into the arts. You better be an engineer or somebody who's going to bring, frankly, money back to the country we fled. Very understandable desire on their part. But they're strangling their beautiful poet kids. And I didn't have that problem for us. When the old man lived with us in his 20s, right up to what? This was on 30. He was maybe 29, 30 years old when he left. We would all have to be quiet when Daddy was writing. We lived in this tiny little rented cabin in the woods of New Hampshire. He would go into his den. He had, a desk and pipes and typewriter and notebooks. And we had to be quiet because Daddy was writing. So all of my friends were working class, and I said to my best friend, Warren Clay, so when's your dad do his writing? He said, writing? He thought I said wiring. My dad's a plumber, not an electrician. But years later, I realized what a gift the old man gave me. As a boy, to watch a grown man go into a room, shut the door, and try to create something beautiful for someone he would never meet. When I started to do that in my early 20s, go down that road, it felt as legitimate a path as law school or medical school or business school, and very few other people get to have that influence. So that's how he's had an influence on me. Long answer. I'm Scotch-Irish. Who else? What else? What's your name? Hi, Denise. Denise asked who are my favorite authors, and my God, just so many. So I've been rereading James Lee Burke because I'm going to interview him, my cousin. God, I can't get over his prose. If you haven't read James Lee Burke from South Louisiana, 40 or so novels to his credit, what a treat you're in for. I read a lot of poetry. I read poetry every day. I mean, even I write 5 days a week. I take 2 days off, but even like on a day I'm not writing, I'll read a poem. To me, it's like a prayer. You want to hear one? Okay, this one I recited to my class yesterday. It's from Mary Oliver. It's called Don't Hesitate. You like Mary Oliver? If you suddenly and unexpectedly feel joy, don't hesitate. Give in to it. There are plenty of lives and whole towns destroyed or about to be. We are not wise and very often not kind, and much can never be redeemed. Still, life has some possibility left. Perhaps this is its way of fighting back, that sometimes something happens better than all the power or riches in the world. It could be anything, really, but very likely you notice it in the instant when love begins. Anyway, that's often the case. Anyway, whatever it is, don't be afraid of its plenty. Joy is not made to be a crumb. Isn't that gorgeous? So, I read these. How can I not want to write as soon as I read a poem like that? But I really love the work of Elizabeth Strout, who's writing now. My Name is Lucy Barton, Olive Kittredge. She's one of my favorite writers. I love Richard Rousseau's novels. I love I love Ian McEwan, the British writer. I think he's a gorgeous novelist. I love the short stories of Raymond Carver and Tobias Wolff and Joyce Carol Oates. Who's a young writer I just discovered? I love Atticus Lish. He's got a beautiful novel called, I love both his books. He's got 2 books. He's the son of the great, I don't like this guy, but Gordon Lish is an editor. But his son's a wonderful writer. And the one that I love the most is his second novel, and Preparation for the Next Life by Atticus Lish. There's a lot. I read every night, and on Sunday I don't read the paper. I stay in my robe. I drink way too much coffee, and I read for 4 or 5 hours. No homework, just what I want to read. So, thank you. What else is on your mind, lovely human beings? Hey, man, what's your name? Have we met? You look familiar. Are you from Newburyport? What's your last name? Hey, Scott. Yeah, maybe I've seen you walking down State Street.
Well, I've lived in Providence now for the past 2 since I married and I've worked here for most of the last 40 years. I've been out going back and forth. Now you do have roots here. You said your dad is from Latin.
And our mother is from here. My dear cousin Molly's sitting there. And every relative we have is from South Louisiana. Every grandparent, aunt, uncle, cousin, everybody.
Do you feel any sort of unique connection between these places that informs what you do?
I think I do, but I'm so semi-conscious or unconscious about it, Scott. I'm getting ready to talk to James Lee Burke. We've talked about Jungian's notion of genetic inheritance, and this notion that we come into this world with all the trauma and the experiences of everyone who came before us, and it's in our psyche, and that's part of the job of the artist. When I'm here in Louisiana, I feel so at home, but I also feel like such an outsider. I grew up with people who talk like this, Scotty. You know what I'm saying, kid? But when I'm with my beautiful cousins and aunt, and oh my God, I just feel like I'm in the bosom of home. But we grew up, it was so strange when I started dating my beautiful Greek wife. She showed me pictures of her family, and there's one outdoor picture of like 30 people on a lawn. I said, what was that, like an outdoor wedding? She said, no, Sunday dinner. So, we were just a family of 6. They broke up, and it was our mother and 4 kids, moving around a lot with no relatives anywhere in sight except 1,800 miles south. So I don't know. Whenever I'm here, I feel genetically at home. But I also feel like an outsider I'm a Yankee. Yeah, I'm such a Yankee. Okay, what's that?
You do talk funny.
I do talk funny. My mother-in-law, Mary, who I have an essay in here called Mary. It's about, she lived with us till she was 99. She lived on the first floor of our house we built. Her husband lived there till he died at 90. She was there for 15 years, died at 99. Driving, cooking, and cleaning her last day. And she was one of my best friends. I didn't just love my old mother-in-law. I loved Mary. I'd go down to her house every Friday night and scratch tickets. I didn't know what a scratch ticket was till she moved in. We'd scratch tickets, listen to Benny Goodman or Tony Bennett on her TV, and talk. But she had such a strong accent, a Boston accent, which is different than 40 miles north where we grew up in the Merrimack Valley. But she would say, like I go down there, she says, "Oh, Andre, I bought you a bottle of beer at the store." So there's that. Who else? What else? I've got like 4 minutes. They're telling me. Burning question. Yes. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I was surprised by it. So this is my novel, House of Sand and Fog, which is it's the 3rd book I published and probably the 5th or 6th I'd written. And real quick, it came from 2 experiences. I dated an Iranian Shiite Muslim girl in college. Fell in love with her, quickly learned you cannot date a Shiite Muslim girl from Iran the way I used to date, which is, hey, I stole a 6-pack. It's not too warm. Want to drink it in the parking lot or the weeds? I couldn't even be alone with her without being with her mom in the apartment, chaperoned. And so I had to date the whole family, and I learned so much Persian culture, ate Persian food. And then her father came from Europe where he'd been, and this was right around the fall of the Shah, and right before Khomeini. And, I grew up in blue-collar neighborhoods, and so I thought, male power is physical power, 300-pound bench press, knockout punch. Yeah, until I met real power. This guy may have been 5'7", may have weighed 140 pounds, but he was a colonel. He worked closely with the Shah, and he spoke like this, like a man accustomed to being listened to by everyone at all times. He scared the hell out of me. But I watched this man work he worked at a shoe factory in the day, and he worked at a convenience store gas station at night, 16 hours a day, trying to keep his nest egg from being spent. And on rare days off, he'd put on his good suit and he'd go look for jobs, the aeronautical engineer he was, and he couldn't get work. And one night I was helping him bring in groceries, and he looked so tired, and he said, Andre, I used to work with a very thick accent. I used to work with kings and queens and presidents and vice presidents and prime ministers of entire countries in my office by myself. Now I serve candy and cigarettes to kids who don't even know who I am. It's like he was John McCain in his country and nobody here. And I couldn't get that out of my head. 15 years later, I read this news article about a woman who gets evicted from her house for failure to pay back taxes she says she didn't know. They evict her anyway, repossess the house, auction it off, and discover wrong house, computer error. It's happened a lot. But the man who bought the house was under no legal pressure to sell it back, and he wasn't sure he wanted to because he was going to make a killing on the resale. And I put that article aside. I found it really interesting. But a few years later, I picked it up, and I saw the man who bought the house had a Middle Eastern name. And then I immediately saw my colonel telling me that about his life. And the question was, what if my colonel bought that house? 4 years later, there's your depressing little book. You guys, thank you very much. Have a good day. Thanks for being here.